Welcome to part 6 of this Biplane Blender tutorial series where we're creating this Boeing-Stearman Model 75. If you haven't seen the previous parts, you can check out the tutorial playlist linked in the description. So in this part, we're going to be modeling the entire engine. Now before we start this part, I wanted to let you know about a really great render farm service for Blender. BlenderGrid is an easy to use render farm specifically designed for Blender. I've used the service and I highly recommend it. Upload your Blender file or a zip file with the blend file and textures. You can change the render settings on the website before rendering. BlenderGrid will let you know the cost before you start the render. You can even choose when you want the render to finish if you're on a tight deadline. While it renders, you can check the rendered frames to make sure everything is rendering properly. Once it finishes, just download the files and compile the frames in a video editor. Use the link in the description to get $20 of render credit on your first render. So let's now start modeling the engine. So I'm going to model some pipes which are behind the engine first. So let's go to the add menu and I'm going to go to curve and add a curve circle. And in object mode, let's bring the curve circle over here to the front and we'll zoom into it. And we'll go into edit mode and we're going to rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees. We'll go to front view and we're just going to scale it up a bit and just bring it down slightly and just fit it right there. We're actually going to scale it down a bit smaller like that. And let's also bring it back a little bit. So let's now give it some thickness by going over here to the object data properties, and on the bevel depth we're going to turn this up just to give it a bit more depth. And I think I want to scale everything down in edit mode just a little bit. And we'll probably have to adjust this later, but for now that is a good spot. Now I want to give this curve a bit more detail because if I zoom in here you can see just a little bit of low detail there. So let's scroll up to the top and we're going to turn this resolution preview, we're going to turn this up to maybe like a 30. So it's a bit higher detail. Now let's add another tube and we're going to model another tube which is going to be an exhaust pipe. So we're going to model all of the different cylinders for the engine, and then the cylinders are going to have like this exhaust pipe which is on the back, and the exhaust pipe will come out here at the very end. So let's go to the add menu, add a Bezier curve. Let's bring the curve over here, and in edit mode we are going to rotate it by 90 degrees on the X, and then we will go to front view and we're going to rotate this over. Just stick this right over here, so let's actually rotate all the way over. And then we're going to take this handle and rotate it like that, scale it down a bit, and this handle will be over here. So we're now going to extrude the handle and rotate it, and extrude the handle again and rotate it. And we're going to do that a few more times so it goes all the way around. And make sure you scale the handles so they're nice and smooth and they look like a circle. And then we'll select this one here and we're going to extrude this one down. And this one is going to start to rotate over. So let's go to side view. We'll bring it down a little bit. All right. And then we're going to extrude it back here. And this is where the end of the exhaust pipe is going to be. So now let's add some thickness. So we'll go here to the data properties, the object data properties. And on the bevel depth, we're going to drag this up so it has more thickness. Then if we go into edit mode, we can select this handle here and we're going to use Alt S. Alt S is going to scale that and make it bigger. So we're going to make the end of the exhaust pipe quite a bit thicker. Let's go back to object mode and we're going to move it all the way back here and just stick it right next to that metal piece. And then back in edit mode, let's rotate this over a little bit so it doesn't go through it, just like that. Maybe rotate this so it's a little bit more straight and kind of scale that down a little bit. And then at the very end of the exhaust pipe, we'll use Alt S again to scale this so it's a bit more thin. Just like that. Let's now give it a solidify modifier. So on the modifier properties, we're going to add solidify just to give it a little bit of thickness. And we'll just turn this down so it's a small value like that. So now it has thickness there on the end. Let's also give it a little bit more quality. So we're going to go back here to the object data properties and we're going to turn the resolution preview up. Let's turn it up to maybe like a 30 as well, so it's higher resolution. And then also we can improve the resolution around in a circle. So this one's going to be turned up to 30, but let's scroll down here. And this bevel resolution, let's turn this up as well. Maybe I'll turn this up to like a 14, so it's a lot more smooth. So we'll select both of these objects. We're going to move them into a new collection. So choose new collection. We can call this engine and click on create. So there's our engine collection. And then we'll rename the objects. So this smaller one here, I'm going to rename this one to engine pipe. And then the larger pipe is going to be called engine exhaust. So let's select this pipe here, and then we'll use Shift S and use the cursor to selected. So the cursor is right there in the center. We're now going to add a new object and we're going to add a new cylinder. And let's change the cylinder settings to 32 so it's more detailed. And in edit mode, we are going to delete both of the faces. So this bottom face and the top face, we'll delete the faces. And then we'll scale it down on the z-axis so it's more flat. And let's also rotate it by 90 degrees on the x-axis. And then scale the entire thing down a bit. We can also scale it up on the y-axis and then bring it forward a little bit. And then we're going to use the shade smooth. Let's rename this. So I'm going to call this object engine ring. And we will now duplicate this object and let's move it forward. And let's rename this object, and we're going to rename this one to cylinder connectors. So cylinder connectors. And we'll select these new objects and make sure we move them into the engine collection. So we'll go into edit mode and we are going to scale this object up a bit, and then we'll scale it down on the Y so it's a little bit more flat, and we'll bring it back a bit. And then back in edit mode, we're going to go to the vertex select. We'll select these vertices and we'll fill a face there. Then we're going to select these vertices and we'll bring it back a little bit. We're going to extrude it and then scale it down like that. And then we're going to extrude this out, but we're also going to scale this down a little bit like that. And then we're going to fill a face there. And then let's use the shade auto smooth for now. So let's go back into edit mode and we're going to select one of these loops and we'll duplicate the loop and move it into the center. We're now going to separate it into its own object. And then we'll select the new cylinder and we'll select it and we'll move it up. We'll scale it down, and we're going to rotate this by 90 degrees, and we will extrude this piece down, and then we're going to select the top and fill the face there. And then if we select everything, let's just bring it down here and scale it down a little bit and just stick it down there. And I think it's a little bit small, so let's just scale it up a little bit. So you can see in object mode, this is rotating from the center, and that's what I want. So I'm going to go to front view, and I'm going to duplicate this and rotate it by 90 degrees. Select both of them and duplicate these, and we're going to rotate these by 180 degrees. And then if we select both of these, we're going to duplicate them and rotate them by 45 degrees. So now that we've duplicated all of these, we have 8 of them. We're going to select all of the ones on the outside here, and we're going to join them into one object. We now want to add a Boolean to Boolean these together. So we're going to select this object first, and let's go here to the modifiers, and we're going to click on add modifier, and we're going to add a Boolean. And then on the Boolean object, we're going to choose the new cylinders that we created, and we're going to make sure the type is set to union so they're joined together. So now what I want to do is select both of them, so select both of these objects here. So box select both of them, and I want to duplicate them, and we're going to move them into a new collection, and we're going to call this new collection backup. So click on backup, click on create. So now here in the outliner, you can see we have a backup collection, and I'm going to make the backup collection red, and we'll minimize it and then hide the backup collection, just in case we need to go back to it. I like doing that when I'm using Booleans or other objects that I'm going to kind of finalize the modeling. So now I want to select this object again, and let's open up the side panel, and we are going to apply the Boolean. So we can now select this object and we can delete it. So if I go into edit mode, you can see the topology is definitely a bit messed up. So we need to fix the topology, but those cylinders are Boolean together. Now we have a problem with these creases here being marked sharp. So if we select everything in edit mode, we can press Ctrl E and let's click on clear sharp. So it's going to clear those sharp edges, and then just make sure we're using the shade auto smooth for now. So I definitely want to fix the topology, because if I, for example, try to add a subsurf modifier, you can see it looks really weird and the object is quite messed up because the topology isn't correct. So let's delete the subdivision surface modifier. So what I want to do is add loop cuts going from this one over to this one, just to kind of fix the topology. But I want to do that all the way around, and it would be really tedious to do it for every single one. So what we're going to do is cut the object into a quarter, and then we're just going to do quarter of it, and then we can mirror it over so we only have to model a quarter of the object. So what we're going to do is go to the face select, we're going to select this face, and also the back face, and we're going to delete the faces. Then we're going to go to front view, and we're going to go to wireframe, and using the vertex select, we're going to box select this side, and then box select all the bottom. So you can see now this half and this quarter is selected, so we're going to delete the vertices. So now we just have that quarter selected. So we're now going to add a mirror modifier, and we're going to mirror it on the x-axis and the z-axis. So now it's going back all the way around. So now we'll go back in edit mode, and we can just fix the topology. So I'm going to use the K button for the knife tool, and we're going to click here, and hit enter. I'm going to go to orthographic view so I can zoom in a bit more, and I'll use the knife tool to cut that part out, and we're going to cut that right there, and we're going to cut this one from this vertex to that vertex. So this is really going to clean up the topology, so I'm going to do this for all of them going all the way down. Now you can see right here when I added this one, if I hit K for the knife tool, it almost looks like there's overlapping vertices. So if I zoom right in here, you can see there are 2 vertices right there, and I don't want that. So let's select everything, and we're going to merge by distance. And you can see it got rid of 6 vertices, but you can see it still didn't merge these 2. So if we open up the merge by distance setting right behind me, we are going to turn up the distance value just to a tiny amount, just turn it up until it merges those together. And just look around your model and make sure it didn't merge anything that we didn't want it to merge, but that looks good. Now right over here on this side, instead of cutting it all the way down here, we can use the knife tool and just cut it across. So cut it across there, and cut this across there. So let's do that up here as well. So use the knife tool, cut that across there, and cut that across there. Let's do that for the other side. So we're going to cut this right there, and then let's go back like that and hit enter. So this way it's going to create a triangle piece. We're now going to use the knife tool again, and we're going to go down here, and then we're going to go over and then just place it right there. Just to make the topology more clean and neat, let's use the knife tool again, and we're going to bring this one up to that one like that. Let's use the knife tool again, and we're going to put this one up to that one, and then we'll use the knife tool again, and this one is going to go down to that one. So let's go down here, and we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to skip some of this because it's pretty much just the same exact thing. So I'll come back when that's finished. And we just have one more right there. So you can see I've added cuts all along there. And now we just need to do the same thing that we did earlier, but we're going to cut it from this side over to the end. So again, I will just come back to this when it's finished because it's pretty much just the same exact process. Now right here, we are going to make these connect up in a triangle like that. And then for this one, we'll cut it down here and then over there. And I'll do the same thing here. So cut that there in a triangle and then use the knife tool again and bring it down and over. And then we'll do the same thing over for this side. So cut this in a triangle and then cut this down and over. And then there we go, I already did the other side. So now the topology is a lot nicer. So now if I add a subdivision surface modifier, you can see everything looks much more smooth. So that's what I want. Let's now duplicate this object and we're going to move it into the backup collection, just so we have another backup of this. So I now want to apply the mirror modifier, and now that's all topology. But I now need to select the faces here, or select the loops and fill the face. Select that one, fill the face, and we're just going to go along here and select all these loops and just fill faces in there. Just like that, and then this loop here, we can fill a face, and then the back loop, we can select that loop and fill a face. So that's looking a lot nicer now. So now if we add a subdivision surface modifier, it's a lot more smooth. We do need to add some loop cuts though to sharpen up some of these areas. So I'm going to start by adding a loop cut right here in the center to give it more geometry. And for now, let's turn the render and viewport both down to 1 so it's not quite as laggy in the viewport. And we're just going to start by adding one loop cut all the way around here. So just add one loop cut on each one of these extra cylinder pieces. Now what I'm going to do is select all of these loops here. So select all the loops on the outer cylinders. And once they're all selected, we are going to zoom into one of them and let's add a bevel. Now I'm going to turn off the subsurf modifier so we can't see it for now. And then I'm going to add a bevel. We'll drag the bevel out. And I'll scroll my mouse wheel until we have like 4 cuts and just place that right there. So now if I turn on the subdivision surface, it's going to look a lot smoother. We can also add another loop cut right here, and let's drag this loop cut up. And again, you can see it's very laggy because it's kind of a high poly mesh, but it also has the subsurf. So let's hide the subdivision surface modifier and then just double tap G to edge slide that up there. Let's also select this loop and we'll add a small bevel to this loop as well. And then select this loop here and add another small bevel to that loop as well. And then here on the back, let's go to local view so we can see this better. We'll select the back and just add another small bevel. So let's now turn back on the subdivision surface modifier. Now you can see there are some really weird sharp points right here, and I don't want this. So instead of using auto smooth, we're just going to shade smooth. Let's also add one more loop cut, and I'm going to drag this loop cut right up there. And again, it's very laggy. So let's hide the subsurf and then just drag it right up there, and then turn the subdivision surface back on. So we can go back out of local view, and what I now want to do is create some little bolts which are going to be around in a circle. So what I want to do is put the 3D cursor into the center of this object. So we'll use Shift S, cursor to selected, and we can now add a new object and we'll add a cylinder. And on the cylinder settings, let's turn it to 6 so it is a hex bolt. We'll close the cylinder settings, and in edit mode, we're going to scale the object way down and bring it up, scale it down again. Let's go to top view, And I just want to bring this right over here and give it a bit of a random rotation. We're now going to duplicate this and we're going to drag it right down here to the other side. And then we're going to select both of these and we will duplicate them and we'll rotate them by 90 degrees. Then we're going to select both of these and we'll duplicate them and rotate them by 45 degrees. And then we're going to select all of them again. So select all those bolts and we'll duplicate it and rotate them again. So we just have bolts in the center. And I believe half of 22, if we rotate this, let's rotate it by 22.5. So 22.5 is half of 45. And then let's select all the bolts and we'll bring the bolts down like this. And then I think they all could be a little bit smaller. So we'll change the transform pivot point to individual origins and then just scale them all down so they're a little bit smaller. All right, let's go back to object mode. And because we moved this in edit mode, you can see the origin point is still in the center there. So I can just go to front view and we'll duplicate this. And then we're going to rotate it and we'll type 45 and enter. And because I did that all in one action, I'll use Shift R to repeat the last action. And we're just going to repeat that. So now they're all around on all the other sides. Let's now hide this object and we're going to select all the bolts and we'll join them into one object. And then we can unhide the other object. So now we have all those bolts in there, one object. Let's go into edit mode and we're just going to select one of the bolts. We'll duplicate it, scale it up, and we're going to rotate it by 90 degrees. Let's bring it down here and just stick it right here on this face. So we're going to have some bigger bolts right there. Let's go to front view. We're going to rotate it a little bit. We'll duplicate it and put it right down here on the bottom and give it a random rotation. And then if we select both of these, we will duplicate them and rotate them by 90 degrees. And we rotated it by individual origins, and that's not what we want. So let's change the transform pivot point back to median, and then we can rotate it by 90 degrees. We're now going to select both of these two again, and we'll duplicate this and rotate it by 45 degrees. So we have a few more bolts there on the engine. And I'm going to select all of the bolts again, and I think I just want to move them out a little bit, so I'll just bring them out slightly farther. So I now to model another cylinder piece on the front. So we're going to select this piece here, we'll duplicate it and move it forward. And in edit mode, we'll scale it down a bit and stick it here inside that other cylinder. We'll select this loop and we'll bring this loop back. And then we will extrude it and scale it down, and then we will fill a face there. Let's now duplicate this piece, scale it up, and then we can extrude it back into the other cylinder and then delete the faces. And let's shade it auto smooth in object mode. We also need to recalculate the normals back in edit mode. So let's now go to the face select and select this face, and I'll bring it way back. And then let's go to side view. We can kind of see what the engine is looking like. So I want to extrude this out and then kind of scale it down a little bit, bring it back here. And if we select everything, let's maybe bring everything back a little bit. Then I'm going to select this face and just extrude that face out like that. And then I want to add a few more bolts around here. So we'll select the bolts object. We'll go into edit mode. We're going to just use the L key with our mouse hovered over the objects just to select all of these bolt pieces. And we're going to duplicate them, and we're going to scale them down, and then we're going to separate them into their own object. And then back in object mode, let's select these two objects, and we're going to join them into one object. And then in edit mode, again, we are going to select these bolts here and scale them up a little bit, and we'll stick them back here and scale them up a little bit more. Let's now add the bevel modifier. So we'll add the bevel. Let's turn up the segments to 3. And then this amount here, we're just going to turn up to a pretty small amount. Now let's actually shade it smooth. Instead of auto smooth, we're going to use shade smooth. Then let's add the weighted normal to kind of flatten up and sharpen those flat areas. Also, if I zoom in here, I can see that the bevel is too big. So let's make the bevel quite a bit smaller. And then let's also add a subdivision surface level with just one level. So a subsurf with one level. And maybe bring this out just a little bit. Let's rename this object. So this is going to be called engine front because it's the front of the engine. And let's make sure it's in the engine collection. So let's now create those engine cylinders. So we're going to create the half side of one engine cylinder and we'll mirror it over to the other side. And then we're going to duplicate it and have 8 different cylinders on each one of these cylinder pieces. So let's just select this piece here. And we're going to use Shift S and use cursor to selected so it's in the center there. And then let's add a new object and we're going to add a new cylinder. And on the add cylinder settings, we'll turn the vertices to 32. And we'll go into edit mode and we'll bring the cylinder up and scale it down and bring it down like that. Just scale it way down so it's a lot thinner. And we'll go to front view and kind of bring this up a little bit. And that's actually a little bit too far, so let's scale it down and then bring it down a little bit farther. Bring it about right there. And then also this back pipe here, I think in edit mode, I could scale the back pipe up just a little bit. And then if we go back into edit mode of the cylinder object, let's bring it up just a little bit. And we'll make it a little bit more thin. So let's now select the bottom face and we're going to inset the bottom face. Let's go back to front view, go into wireframe, inset that face there, and then we're going to extrude the entire thing down a bit. Now you can see it's not quite in the very center, so let's go to top view, go to wireframe, and we're just going to move this here so it's in the very center there of that cylinder. Now I believe this cylinder is a little bit too big, so if we select both of these loops here, let's scale it, and we are going to exclude the z-axis. And just scale that down a little bit more. So now let's model a new piece. So I'm going to add a cube, but this cube is still going to be added in edit mode. So we're going to bring the cube up. Let's scale it down here, bring it forward and bring it down and scale it in a little bit. Just like that. And I now want to separate this cube into its own object, but I wanted the origin point to be in the very center, so that's why I added it in edit mode. So I'll just separate it by its own object. All right, so now this cube is its own object. Let's go into edit mode, and we can go to the face select. We'll select this face and bring it back, and then we can add a mirror modifier. We can turn on clipping and drag it into the mirror, and then just delete the face there. So now we can select this piece and just bring it back a little bit, and bring this piece out a little bit. And we'll select the entire cube and maybe scale it down a little bit. And then let's add another loop cut right there. And then we'll go to the face select and select this face and just extrude that face up. So now we're going to add a subdivision surface modifier and shade it smooth. And in edit mode, let's select these bottom faces and delete them because we don't actually need those faces. Let's now turn up the levels and viewport pretty high to like a 3. And then we will go to front view. We'll go into wireframe, we'll box select that loop there and bring it in a little bit because it was a little bit too far out. Let's also add a loop cut right up there to kind of sharpen the bottom. And then I think I need to scale everything up a little bit and bring it out a little bit. Let's go back to object mode and we're going to select this object again and go into edit mode. And we are going to select this loop here. Let's duplicate it and move it down. Let's scale it down a bit. And then we can extrude this loop up here. And then we'll extrude it and scale it in. Select the bottom loop and we are going to extrude it and scale it in like that. And then if we select everything, let's recalculate the normals. Also in object mode, let's bring this object up because it was kind of overlapping. You kind of see it through the mesh. So just bring it up a little bit. So we'll go back into edit mode of this cylinder piece and we're going to select this entire loop that we've created here. So this is going to be a kind of fin piece and we're going to duplicate it and have a lot of fin pieces. If you take a look at reference images of these type of engines, they have all these little like thin metal pieces and that is used to disperse the heat of the engine. So it has more surface area, then the heat can kind of be dispersed on the metal surface. And then when the plane's moving, the wind can blow over the surface and cool it. Now before I duplicate them and make more of them, I'm going to go inside here and I'm going to select these two inner loops and I'm just going to scale them up on the z-axis. And then if we select the two loops on the outside, let's scale it down on the z-axis. So it's a little bit tapered. We're now going to select this entire piece. Let's go to front view and I'm going to bring it down here, maybe scale it down just slightly. And then we're going to duplicate it, move it up and place it right about there. And because we did that all in one action, I can press Shift R to repeat the last action. We're just going to continue to do that until it goes all the way up like that. Now I think the entire object is a little bit squished. So in edit mode, I'm just going to scale everything up on the z-axis and then bring everything up a little bit. I think it could be just a little bit taller. And then we'll bring this object up here to fit that. Now for this object here, let's just use the smooth. We're going to use the shade auto smooth. And then let's just shade this with the shade auto smooth and that looks better. Also back in edit mode, if I select everything, I want to scale everything down but exclude the z-axis. So just scale it like that. So we'll scale it, we'll hit Shift Z to exclude the z-axis and just make it a little bit more thin because I think it was also a little bit too thick. So we're now going to add a new cube, which we're going to stick right here. So let's go to the add menu, we'll add a cube, we'll bring the cube up and we'll scale it way down. And let's go to top view and we'll bring it forward. And then in edit mode, we'll scale it out just a little bit. So now we're going to add two loop cuts right there and we'll scale the loop cuts out like that. And then we're going to add another loop cut way down there at the bottom. And then let's go to the face select and we can select these three faces and we can delete the faces. And then let's go to the edge select. We'll select this edge and just fill that by hitting F. And we're now going to go to front view. Let's go to wireframe and we'll go to the vertex select. I'm going to box select the bottom and we'll scale it in a little bit. And then we'll box select these vertices here and just scale that out a little bit so the angle is smooth. So now we're going to box select the top parts here and go back to solid view, and I can bring this down here. We're just going to stick it right about there on the top. Let's also change the transform pivot point to individual origins, and we're going to scale it on the x-axis so it's a little bit more thin. And then also in wireframe we can select the bottom and bring the bottom up just a little bit. So we now just have that little shape there, and it goes down, across, and then back up. Let's now just add a bevel to this object. So we'll add a bevel. We'll turn the segments to 3. Let's turn the amount to 0. And then I can just hold down the shift key and drag the amount to make it very subtle. And then we'll just shade the object smooth. Also back in edit mode, let's just scale it down on the y-axis so it's just as big as it needs to be, but not much bigger. So now what we're going to do is create these little like grid or fin pieces, and we're going to make them along here and also right over here. So let's go into edit mode of this object, and I'm just going to select one of these pieces, and I'm going to duplicate it and move it up, and then we're going to separate it into its own object. Then we'll select the new object here, let's bring it down, and we can go to front view, and in wireframe we're going to delete half of it, and that way we can add a mirror modifier so it mirrors over to the other side. Let's turn on clipping, and we're going to drag this in so it merges with the mirror. And now I can drag this back a little bit to make it a little bit longer. And then we can also scale it on the x-axis so it kind of fits this shape a little bit better, and also scale it in on the y-axis. And it looks like we need to bring it over so it's more in the very center there, like that. And then let's select these vertices here and also select these vertices here. Let's turn on proportional editing, and I can bring this out, and let's just change the size of the proportional editing just to kind of fit that. So you can see it rounds around more and it fits the shape of that object a bit better. So back in edit mode, we're going to select this entire piece, and we're going to duplicate it and move it down, and then we'll use Shift R to repeat the last action. And if we select all of them, let's move all of them down a little bit. And then we will just select the top one, so just select the entire top piece, and we'll duplicate it and move it up here like that. And then I'll hit Shift R to repeat the last action, and we're just going to have it go all the way up there, pretty much all the way to the top. Although I don't really want to be on this top one, so let's just delete that last top one. That's a bit better. We can also turn off proportional editing because we don't need proportional editing anymore. Now, I don't want the grids to be right in here, so we're going to use a Boolean to cut them out in the very center. We're just going to have them out here on the side. So first, let's select this object and let's scale it out and just make it slightly longer so it covers those entire pieces. We're now going to select the fin pieces again, and we are going to add a Boolean modifier. Let's actually apply the mirror modifier, so just apply that. So now that's applied, so the mirror modifier won't be messing up the Boolean. So now in the Boolean object, we can choose the object here, and we're going to choose this object here, this square cube object. And on the type here, we're going to leave it as difference. You can see if I select the cube and hide it, you can see now the Boolean is cutting that out. So let's unhide that object. So now we can just select this object, and we can just click on the dropdown and apply the modifier. So now if we just hide this object and go into edit mode, we can just use the L key to select those entire pieces, and then we can just delete the vertices. And we'll do the same thing here for the back, hit L to select them all, and then we'll just delete those vertices. And let's unhide all the objects again. Let's now go back into edit mode to the fin pieces, and I'm just going to select one of these here on the bottom, and I'll duplicate it and move it up, and let's rotate it over on the Y by 90 degrees, and we're going to separate it into its own object. And then back into edit mode in the new object, I'll move it over, and we can add a mirror modifier. So now let's go to front view, and I'll bring this down here, and we're going to have more which are going to be slanted over along this piece. So let's scale it down, bring it closer, maybe scale it down so it's a little bit more thin, bring it down here, and then we also need to scale it up like this so it's a little bit longer. And then let's go into wireframe, we can select these vertices. Let's go back here to the back and select these vertices. We're going to turn on proportional editing, and then we can scale them up a little bit, so scale them out. And what we need to do is scale it instead of individual origins. Let's scale it by median point, and we'll scale that out a little bit so it's a little bit more straight, kind of bring it up like that. So just kind of fix the shape so it's a bit more round there. And then we'll scale everything in a little bit so that's looking better. And let's bring it a little bit closer to the mirror. Now we don't need these vertices down here, so if we go to front view, let's just box select these vertices on the bottom and we'll delete the vertices. And then if we select these ones, let's drag it up like that. So they're just going into this little square piece and then they're ending. So now let's go to front view and I can duplicate this and let's start to rotate it over slightly. Although I want to turn off proportional editing, we'll duplicate it and rotate it, duplicate again and rotate it, duplicate again and rotate it. And I think I need to select some of these and move them back in so they're a little bit closer to each other, and duplicate again and rotate it. We're just going to do a few of them, not all the way up, but just a little bit farther. So maybe I'll just do one more right about there. So you now have more of those little pieces which are going to disperse the heat. Let's go into edit mode and we can select these pieces and just drag these pieces down so that they go inside that square shaped piece. So in like that. This piece here, drag it back. This is also too far, so drag this back. And you can also double tap the G key. That's actually a little bit better just to drag that back there. All right, so now we have that other piece there, which is going to disperse more of the heat. So let's now select this object, the base object, and we'll go into edit mode. And we are going to go to the face select and select all the faces around the top and also the top face. And we'll duplicate it, and then we will separate it by its own object. And we'll select the new object and we'll scale it up. And we're going to make kind of a little cap piece, which is going to cover all of these pieces here. So we'll bring it up a bit farther, and let's also scale it out and scale it out just so it's quite a bit thicker. So like that. And then if we go to the edge select, we'll select this edge and just fill a face there. And then we can just add a loop cut. We're going to add a loop cut and drag this down. And then if we go to the face select and select the bottom face, we're going to inset the bottom face so it's even more sharp. Let's also add 2 loop cuts right here. So 2 loop cuts on the side and drag these out so it's a little bit more of a defined shape. And I think I want to squish everything down on the Z-axis so it's a little bit more flat. Let's also go to front view. We'll go to the vertex select and go to wireframe. And we're going to select this corner on the end and just bring it down a little bit. And this part bring up a little bit. So this way, this piece is going to be a little bit slanted. So now we're going to select everything in edit mode and we're going to duplicate this piece. And we'll scale the piece down, bring it up like that. So we're going to have another little piece right on top here. And we're going to separate this by selection so it's its own object. And then we'll take the new object and in edit mode, we're going to bring it down and kind of move it over and just stick it right there. Maybe squish it down a little bit along the Y-axis so it's not quite as long. Also, another thing I want to do is go back into edit mode of this piece here. And we are going to box select just the front side. So just this half front. And we're going to bring it forward so we have quite a bit more extra space there on the bottom. So it's a bit longer. So now I'm going to select this object here, and we are going to apply the subdivision surface modifier. So just apply it. So now you can see it's all geometry. And what we're now going to do is make some little screws. We're going to have 4 screws on these sides. So let's add a new object. So we're going to add a new cylinder. And on the cylinder settings, let's turn the vertices to 12. And I'll bring the object over, bring it up here, and let's zoom into the object. Let's make it a lot smaller. Drag it over here and bring it down, zoom into it again, let's bring it down a bit farther, and then we are going to apply the scale. We'll then go into edit mode and we'll scale it down and bring it over here. Let's go to top view. I'm going to scale it down, and then also let's scale it up on the Z-axis and bring it down a little bit like that. And we're going to stick it right in here and maybe scale it up a little bit. And then we're going to duplicate it, move it over, select both of them and duplicate them and move them over to the other side. And maybe just kind of center that. So we're now going to use a Boolean. So we're going to select this object here, and let's just apply the mirror modifier. And then we're going to add a Boolean. And for the object, we are going to choose the cylinders that we added, and it's going to be set to difference. So then if you want to, you can select both of these objects and duplicate them and move them into the backup just in case we want to go back to it. And then if we select the center object, we will apply the Boolean modifier. And now if we move this out of the way, you can see we've just added that little cut there. So now in edit mode, we're going to select these pieces and we're going to change the transform pivot point to individual origins. And we're going to scale them all down and then just bring them down. And we're now going to select all the top faces here, and we are going to inset the faces. And then let's go to orthographic view and zoom in, and we can now extrude those faces down. So we just have like some little bolts or screws there. And then let's select both of these pieces right here on this side. You can see that this piece, because it kind of curves down here, I want to bring these down just so they're a little bit lower. And maybe select everything and bring them all down a little bit. Then if we select this object again, we're going to shade auto smooth. Now you can see with the shade auto smooth, this part here still has a few sharp areas. So let's just turn up the angle to a small amount. I think like a 32 will be just fine. So now that looks smooth inside there. And this object, let's also shade auto smooth and turn up the angle to like a 32. That looks better. So now if we select this object, we want to Go into edit mode and just delete the half side and delete the vertices. We don't want that side, but we are going to instead add a mirror modifier. And then both of these objects have the same modifiers except the mirror. So if we select this piece, shift select the centerpiece, we can join it into one object. So now it's mirrored over. So now I want to add a little pipe, which is going out of this one, going over, and then going back into this piece. So let's center the 3D cursor, and we're going to add another cylinder, and we're going to turn the vertices to 32, and we are going to drag it back. Let's drag it up. We'll scale it way down. We'll zoom into the cylinder. Let's drag it over and drag it down here, and then we can apply the object scale. Then in edit mode, we can rotate it on the y-axis by 90 degrees. And then if we select both of these faces on either side, we can delete the faces. If we select everything, let's drag it back. And then also we can add a mirror modifier. And then let's turn on clipping and drag it in here to match the mirror. And we'll scale it way down, maybe bring it a little bit up in object mode. So let's go to front view and we'll go to edit mode. So let's go into orthographic view so we can zoom in closer, and then we'll use the vertex select and just select the end. And we'll go to front view and we'll go to wireframe, and we're going to extrude it and scale it down, and then we can extrude it out. And then we can extrude it and rotate it, and extrude it and rotate it, extrude it and rotate it like that, and extrude it and rotate it. And then we can extrude the entire thing down and just stick it down there into the other piece. So you can kind of see what we're creating now. Let's select everything and maybe bring everything up and bring everything in a little bit. Now let's go back into orthographic view and zoom in, and in wireframe I'm going to select this piece here, and let's double tap the G key and drag it back out. And then I'm going to extrude it and scale it, and then we'll extrude it, and let's go to front view and drag it down here, and we'll extrude it and scale it again, and then extrude it down again. And then if we select everything, let's scale it down a little bit so everything's just a bit smaller, and we'll bring it right down here. And then if we select this loop, we'll bring the loop in there. So there we go, we now have a pipe which comes up, goes over, and then goes back down into that other piece. And I think I might just select it and bring it back a little bit. So we're now going to add some curves because I want to have a wire which is coming out here and going into this piece. So let's bring the 3D cursor right here, and we are going to add a curve, Bezier curve. In edit mode, let's scale it down, bring it over here, and we're scaling along the individual origins, so let's scale it along the median point. Scale everything down, and we can rotate it, and we'll stick it right in there. And then we'll select this handle and bring it over, bring it back a bit. If we go to top view, let's scale it down and rotate it, and we'll extrude it, rotate it, maybe scale it up a little bit so it's a little bit more round, and then extrude it here, bring it over, and extrude it again. And we want to stick it right in here so it goes into this little piece. So we're going to rotate it. You can see we need to rotate this way down first. So let's bring this over here and then extrude it, start to rotate it back, and then extrude again. And this piece can go right there inside that little pipe, the smaller pipe. And then I'll just fix this here, make the rotation a little bit more smooth. All right, and back in object mode, let's go over here to the object data properties. Let's go down to the geometry bevel, and we'll just turn up that bevel depth. Just about that far. So now right here on the base of it, I want to add kind of little cylinder and a little bolt shape. So let's go to the add menu, and we're going to add a new cylinder. Let's scale the cylinder way down. Let's go to orthographic view, zoom in, and we can rotate the cylinder by 90 degrees. And let's bring it a bit more into the center of where that chord is. And then let's scale it down and bring it out a little bit, kind of scale it along the y-axis. Let's go to the face select and select this face, and we'll drag it back. And we are going to inset the face, extrude it out, and then extrude it and scale it, and then extrude it out again, just to add like a bit more detail there. So now I want to center the 3D cursor right here, and I'll go to the add menu, and I'm going to add another cylinder, but this cylinder is going to be like a hex bolt, so we're going to change the vertices to 6. And we'll scale it way down, and we'll rotate it by 90 degrees on the x-axis, and let's scale it up, stick it right there, and then we will scale it down so it's much more flat. And let's just bring it in here. We'll go to top view, and just drag it in there, and then go to side view, and go to wireframe and make sure it's about in the center. Now this object here is a little bit too big, and it's also rotating too quickly. So let's drag this back a bit, and this handle, let's scale that up a little bit so it's a bit more straight. And then also with this still selected, with the curve selected, let's turn down the bevel depth so it's a little bit more thin. So now let's select this circle again, go into edit mode, and we want to select the back face there. So select that face, and we're going to bring that face out so it's a bit longer. So let's go back into edit mode of our circle object and we'll go to the vertex select. We'll just select one of these loops of vertices and we'll duplicate it. Let's scale it down so it's thinner and then extrude it back in. And then if we select that loop there, let's just fill a face. And if we select everything, we can recalculate the normals. So let's now deselect everything and we're just going to select that hex bolt and we'll duplicate it and we'll make another hex bolt. And this one will be a bit smaller and maybe a little bit thicker or a little bit wider. And there we go. So we now have that little piece there, and let's just use the shade auto smooth. Now I want to add another bigger pipe, and that pipe is going to connect into this exhaust pipe. So let's go into edit mode of the exhaust pipe, and I'm going to select these two handles here, and I'll duplicate it, and then we're going to separate it into its own object by hitting P. Let's select the new object and go into edit mode, and let's scale it down on the Z-axis so it's flat. And on top view, we can rotate it by 90 degrees and we'll scale it way down. And then you can use Alt-S to make it a bit thinner. And let's drag it up right here. And let's actually bring it down a little bit. And we're going to stick it right in here inside the cylinder. So put it right in there. And then we'll select this piece and we are going to go to top view. And we can extrude it and rotate it and extrude it and rotate it and just put it right there. So it's just going to go inside the exhaust pipe. Now we don't actually need the solidify for this object, so if we go back to the modifiers, we can delete the solidify. And then if we select everything, let's bring it down a bit, and also we can drag this down a little bit, bring that down a little bit. And then if we select this handle, let's use Alt-S to make it a little bit thicker and make this one a little bit thicker. So we've modeled all of the little pieces. So now what we want to do is we want to join all these little pieces together into one object, and then we can duplicate it and rotate it all the way around. So to join objects together into one object, all the modifiers need to be the same. So we're going to have to apply a lot of the modifiers. So this one just has the smooth by angle. This one here also has the smooth by angle. So if we select both of these, we can join them into one object. This here has a bevel, so we will apply the bevel, and then we'll select this and join it into one object. This here has a mirror modifier and a subsurf, so we're going to apply both of these, and then we can join that together. This here also has a mirror, so we'll apply that, and then join that together. This object here, we can select this and this there, join that together, and then this piece here, this also has a mirror and a subsurf, so we will apply both of these, and then select the other object and join it together. So most of it now is one object. This object here, we will apply the mirror and then join it together. This object here, also apply the mirror and then join it together like that. So now we have all the objects just except the curve objects. So we're going to select both curve objects and we're going to go object, we're going to convert it, and we're going to convert it to a mesh. So now you can see they're a mesh. So if we select them with this object, we'll join it together into one object. So now you can see this entire piece is one object. That's going to be our cylinder. So let's save the project again. So we can now go to front view, and you can see because of how we modeled this, you can see the origin point is still in the very center. So this way we can duplicate it and we can rotate it around and make all the cylinders. So we're going to duplicate it and then we'll rotate it by 45 degrees and enter. And because we did that all in one action, we can use Shift R to repeat the last action. So now we have all those cylinders. Now you can see there is a bit of a problem here. You can see that this exhaust pipe isn't really connecting up to this exhaust pipe. So in edit mode, we just need to select these cylinders and just move them around just to fit the shape of it, because they need to be a little bit farther out. All right, let's go down here. This one needs to be a little bit farther out. This one here needs to come up a little bit. So let's find the handle. Let's find this handle and we'll bring it up a little bit. Maybe select this handle and make it a little bit thicker. So now if we go right up here to the beginning, you can see we also have this one, which needs to connect to this one here. So we are going to rotate this and move it down a little bit so that it fully connects with that piece. So this one connects. Then we have this one, and this one needs to be brought up a little bit. So that connects. Then we have that one and that one. We're gonna have 8 of them total. All right, that one's good, that one's good. Right down here, now you can see at the very last one, this one I want to connect up to the starting of the exhaust pipe. So if we go into edit mode, we'll select the very edge and we'll drag it back and scale it down, and we can rotate it and then just scale the size of that handle. And we're just going to stick it here so that both handles merge together. So both of these cylinders are going to merge just like that. And that's looking great. So now we have the beginning of the exhaust pipe, then all of the exhausts can kind of come out of each one of the cylinders all the way around. And then finally, they're going to come out here. The exhaust is going to come out here at the end of the pipe. So before we finish this part, let's just rename all the objects. So you can see we have a few objects here which are not in the right collection. So in the outliner, we'll hold down the shift key and select all these objects, and we're going to put them in the engine collection. Now we're just going to rename all these. So this is going to be called engine cylinder 1. And then we're going to rename all these. So this one's going to be engine cylinder 2, 3, 4, all the way till 8. Alright, and there's the last one, engine cylinder 8. So because I renamed these objects, I'm just going to hide them. We also have this here, that's the exhaust pipe. This is just the pipe, that's the engine back. This here is the engine ring, the cylinder connectors. We also have this one here, so this one I'm going to rename to engine bolts or engine screws. Then we have this here, which is engine front. And that's all the objects. So we can unhide all the objects. We'll press Ctrl S to save, and that's going to wrap it up for this part of the tutorial series. So thank you so much for watching the tutorial series. And when the next part is released, it's going to be right up there on the end screen, and the link will be in the video description. And in the next part, we're going to be modeling the propeller, and then we're going to be also modeling some fuel lines, which go from the wings down to the body. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next part.